All right, welcome, dear friends. Welcome to our spiritual home, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Springs. We are glad to have you with us today. My name is Jami, Cruz, but we'll learn a little bit about myself in a few seconds. This is a liberal community for all ages, promoting spiritual growth, social justice, and the arts. As such, ours is an active church, and everyone is invited to participate in any of our activities. To learn more about our events, our church calendar is on our website, uutarpon.org, or we'd be happy to talk with you during coffee hour. Our children are with us during the beginning of the service at this time, and we have faith formation programming available with our gifted leader, Jami Cruz. Children gather for their time together with her after the story. If you'd like more information about our programming, please contact Reverend Kristina or see me, Jami Cruz, after the service. For those present with us in the building, we have connection cards available in the pews near the hymnals. If you fill one out and put it in the offering plate or give it to one of our greeters, we will be able to keep in touch with you. If you are watching us on Zoom or YouTube, you can send us an email at membership@uutarpon.org to get connected. There are also small cards to write any joys or concerns that you would like to share with us if you prefer writing it. We are also requiring all people, all ages, to mask while indoors here at the church. We are delighted to have speakers today leading the service. Music is provided by our music director, Bonnie Whitehurst, and the choir. Again, welcome.
We'll begin our service by singing number 1003 in this Teal hymn book. It might be right there. We'll be singing each line and repeating each line before we go on to the next line. And then we will be doing, and then after you get familiar with it, you can pick a line, because we've picked a line and 4 parts will be going at the same time. So whatever part you like, you stay with it.
Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going?
Our opening words today are by Karen G. Johnson. Humans make maps of stars, choosing some stars, ignoring others. To protect our imaginations, project our imaginations into the heavens. These maps shift over time across cultures. Names change for the assemblage of bright points: Drinking Gourd, Big Dipper, Plow, Lost Hunters. Humans make constellations by connecting stars. Humans make meaning by connecting stories. Story to narrative to story. Some blaze bright, some are faint. Most are backdrop to the great and mundane human unfolding. Let us imagine the stories of our lives as a starry universe above our heads. As leaders of this congregation, we are tasked and trusted to draw constellations in this, our beloved, small universe. May the stories we connect draw constellations that reflect a shared ministry that calls out to the best in us.
We light our chalice with these words from Rachel Hayes. We light our chalice this morning with our hearts turned to the work of our congregation. We have inherited this institution from great generations of people who believe in the power of human beings to bear love into the world. We carry this tradition for those who find comfort, inspiration, and joy within its real and virtual spaces. We tend the spark of imagination and hope for the world to come.
And let us sing together hymn number 1, 2, 3 in this great book.
Our story today is Stone Soup. 3 monks, Hock, Lock, and Sue, traveled along a mountain road. They talked about cat whiskers, the color of the sun, and giving. "What makes one happy, Sue?" asked Hock from the youngest monk. Old Sue, who was the wisest, said, "Let's find out." The sound of a bell brought their gaze to the rooftops of a village below. They could not see from so high above that the village had been through many hard times. Famine, floods, and war had made the villagers weary and untrusting of strangers. They had even become suspicious of their neighbors. The villagers worked hard, but only for themselves. There was a farmer, a tea merchant, a scholar, a seamstress, a doctor, a carpenter, and many others, but they had little to do with one another. When the monks reached the foot of the mountain, the villagers disappeared into their houses. No one came to the gates to greet them. And when the people saw them entering the village, they closed their windows tight. The monks knocked on the door of the first house. There was no answer. Then the house went dark. They knocked on a second door, and the same thing happened. It happened again from one house to the next. These people do not know happiness, they all agreed. But today, said Sue, his face as bright as the moon, we'll show them how to make stone soup. They gathered twigs and branches and made a fire. They placed a small tin pot and filled it with water from the village well. A brave little girl who was watching them came to them. "What are you doing?" she asked. "We're gathering twigs," said Locke. "We're making a fire," said Hawk. "We're making stone soup, and we need 3 round, smooth stones," said Sue. The little girl helped the monks look around the courtyard until they found just the right ones. Then they put them in the water to cook. "These stones will make an excellent soup," said Sue. "But this is a very small pot. It won't make much, I'm afraid." "My mother has a bigger pot," said the girl. The little girl ran home. As she started to take a pot, her mother asked what she was doing. "The 3 strangers are making soup from stones," she said. "They need our biggest pot." Said the girl's mother. "Stones are easy to come by. I'd like to learn how to do that." The monks poked the coals. As smoke drifted up, the neighbors peered out from their windows. The fire and the large pot in the middle of the village was a true curiosity. One by one, the people of the village came out to see just what this stone soup was. "Of course, old-style stone soup should be well seasoned with salt and pepper," said Hawk. "That's true," said Locke as he stirred the giant pot filled with water and stones. "But we have none." "I have some salt and pepper," said the scholar, his eyes big with curiosity. He disappeared and came back with salt and pepper and even a few other spices. Sue took a taste. "The last time we had soup of this size and color, carrots made the broth very sweet." "Carrots?" said the woman from the back. "I may have a few carrots, but just a few." And off she ran. She returned with as many carrots as she could carry and dropped them into the pot. "Do you think it would be better with onions?" said Hawk. "Oh, yes, maybe an onion would taste good," said a farmer, and he hurried off. He returned a moment later with 5 big onions, and he dropped them into the bubbling soup. "Now that's a fine soup," he said. The villagers all nodded their heads as the smell was very agreeable. "But if only we had some mushrooms," said Sue, rubbing his chin. Several villagers licked their lips. A few dashed away and returned with fresh mushroom, noodles, pea pods, and cabbages. Something magical began to happen among the villagers. As each person opened their hearts to give the next person gave even more. And as this happened, the soup grew richer and smelled more delicious. I imagine the emperor would suggest we had dumplings, said one villager. And bean curd, said another. What about cloud ear and mung beans and yams, cried some of the others. And taro root and winter melon and baby corn, cried the villagers. Garlic, ginger root, soy sauce, lily buds. I have some, people cried out. And off they ran, returning with all they could carry. The monks stirred the pot, and the pot bubbled. How good it smelled, how good it would taste, how giving the villagers had become. At last the soup was ready. The villagers gathered together. They brought rice and steamed buns. They brought lychee and sweet cakes. They brought tea to drink, and they lit lanterns. Everyone sat down to eat. They had not been together for a feast like this as long as anyone could remember. After the banquet, they told stories, sang songs, and celebrated long into the night. Then they unlocked their doors and took the monks into their homes and gave them very comfortable places to sleep. In the gentle spring morning, everyone gathered together near the willows to say farewell. Thank you for having us as your guests, said the monks. You have been most generous. Thank you, said the villagers. With the gifts you have given, we will always have plenty. You have shown us that sharing makes us all richer. And to think, said the monk, to be happy as simple as making stone soup. And now we have our children, if they would like to come up with Miss Jami. Now is the time in the service where we take our offering for the work and welfare of this church. Ours is a free faith, which must sustain itself financially. Please go to our website, uutarpon.org, and click the donate button, or you may mail your offering to the church at 57 Reed Street, Tarpon Springs, Florida. For those of you with us in person, place your offering in the sanctuary plate as they're passed around.
Call
May we now have a moment of silence. Our reading today is by Dana E. Worship. I want to be with people. Often people say that they love coming to a place with so many like-minded people. I know just what they're getting at, and I know they aren't getting it quite right. I don't want to be with a bunch of people who think just like me. I want to be in a beloved community where I don't have to think like everyone else to be loved, to be eligible for salvation. I want to be with people who value compassion, justice, love, and truth, though they have different thoughts and opinions about all sorts of things. I want to be independent mind, people of good heart. I want to be with people who have many names and no name at all for God. I want to be with people who see me in goodness and dignity, who also see my failings and foibles, and who still love me. I want to be with people who feel their inner connection with all existence and let it guide their footfalls upon the earth. I want to be with people who see life as a paradox and don't always rush to resolve it. I want to be with people who are willing to walk the tightrope that is life and who will hold my hand as I walk mine. I want to be with people who let church call them into a different way of being in the world. I want to be with people who support, encourage, and even challenge each other to a higher, more ethical living. I want to be with people who inspire one another to follow the call of the Spirit. I want to be with people who covenant to be honest, engaged, and kind, who strive to keep their promises and hold me to the promises I make. I want to be with people who give of themselves, who share their hearts and minds and gifts. I want to be with people who know that human community is often warm and generous, sometimes challenging, and almost always a grand adventure. In short, I want to be with people like you.
Let this be a heart so clean.
The month of November in this church's stewardship month. Our tradition is to invite members to speak about their personal connection to our church. Two of our longtime members, Greg Rosasco and Judy Lucarelli, people you see here every Sunday, and who have been treasured by this church for all their sharing of time, talents, and treasures to build and sustain UUCTS. Thank you, both of them, for helping us today.
Good morning. My name is Greg Rosasco, and for anyone who cannot see me clearly, I will just point out that I am a tallish, older man with brown hair, a gray beard, glasses, and my beard is close cropped. I also want to acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Tocobaga and Seminole people. I first encountered this church and Unitarian Universalism in early 2009. Now, what drew me to this encounter were these words: Unitarian Universalism, many beliefs, one faith. Believe it or not, these words were the message on a large billboard visible from US Highway 19 heading north, right here in Tarpon Springs. So that's what I call about advertisements, by goodness. At the time, I was seeking a liberal religious community, having discovered that the many Lutheran churches in Florida were significantly more fundamentalist than those I'd experienced in Maryland. I lived and worked in Maryland for almost 36 years, and during that time, I migrated to Evangelical Lutheran Church in America from my religious roots in Roman Catholicism. I must confess a real excitement upon my first visit to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Springs. I marveled at the wonderful music from Bonnie Whitehurst, which so creatively echoed the excellent sermon from Reverend Meredith Garman, the minister of the UU Church of Gainesville. The Tarpon Church was engaged in a minister call at the time. Reverend Garman's subject was the exploitation of war in the service of religion throughout history. His message and the whole experience resonated with me. But the real takeaway, the thing that closed the deal, so to speak, were the 7 principles. They remain my North Star in religious commitment. The principles have great philosophical significance, but of equal importance for me is the prologue, which states that we covenant and affirm to promote these principles. For the first time in my lifelong search, I saw the possibility of a supportive community working to make real the essential ethical norms, worldviews, and values that I have held deeply since my 4 years in a Jesuit college education. The congregational commitment is made without the requirement for a personal affirmation of supernatural revelations, commands, promises, or threats. This was sort of the way I wanted to live my religious life. I joined the church about a year later, in January of 2010. Throughout the year before joining, I participated in celebrations of the reopening of the recently restored offices, then known as the parsonage, and the welcoming of a new minister. In addition to attendance at services, I was active in some social justice projects and demonstrations, and a regular attendee of a social justice forum held prior to the services each Sunday. This forum was led by a very inspired and gifted activist who was also a member of the Board of Trustees. I don't know whatever. My fingers don't work anymore. Sadly, however, by the fall of 2010, 9 months later, a major rift had developed in the congregation. Unable or unwilling to deal with the conflict, and I don't know which, the new minister resigned. Also, the Board of Trustees had major resignations, and believe it or not, the social justice champion was told to leave the congregation, which he did while grimacing at his being excommunicated in a Unitarian Universalist church. The congregation suffered major losses in membership and regular attendance because of this unresolved failure to remain in covenant. At this juncture, I made the difficult decision to continue as a member and try to help rebuild the community that I had long been seeking. In all candor, I also needed this community since I was in the midst of a painful separation and divorce. The next thing I knew, I was chair of the Building and Grounds Committee, chair of the Social Justice Committee, and a member of the Worship Committee. That's the UUA, I guess you know that, right? That was 12 years ago. It has not been a smooth road for us over the span of those years. Including the first called minister I mentioned, we have experienced 6 ministers in 12 years. We were served by a visiting minister for over a half a year after the first mentioned minister resigned, followed that by an interim minister for 2 years. Our time with the interim minister enabled us to call a new minister who joined us late in the summer of 2013. Just a few months later, the sinkholes were discovered, and the church and office buildings were closed to our use. Our new minister resigned the following summer of 2014, and we were without a minister until the fall of 2015 when Reverend Murphy was hired. Later, he was called as our settled minister. He resigned for health reasons at the close of 2019, just 7 months after we finally had reoccupied this beautifully restored building, the sanctuary, and the totally redesigned forum room. During Reverend Murphy's time with us, the redesign, construction, and restoration process was a central focus for an amazing group of talented and dedicated members of our church, many of whom are still with us. This was an exceedingly complex project, along almost every imaginable direction. Aesthetics, assuring historical consistency, questions of energy usage, church functionality while accommodating the artwork, and the very high costs we would incur were all major challenges. In the course of dealing with these, our covenantal community was not successful in resolving certain differences, and again, there was a significant rift in leadership and membership losses. As I look over the many interpersonal and congregational relationships problems we have encountered over the years, I do see learnings and growth emerging from rebuilding the community after each failure. We developed our somewhat aspirational mission statement during the tenure of our interim minister in 2011 through 2011 and 13. I say aspirational because we committed to being a congregation for all ages as part of our mission. I note that this aspirational aspect was central in our recent search process. Social justice, spiritual growth, and the arts were familiar aspects of our internal and external dynamics to some degree, but explicitly affirming them in our mission was very important. During Reverend Murphy's tenure, we developed our first covenant statement, and just recently with Reverend Kristina, we articulated a vision statement. The latter two statements are results of a good covenantal process. However, they are aspirational. We remain a work in progress, constantly growing into and sometimes losing our way as we seek to realize the great promise of the UU covenant to affirm and promote our principles. That great promise is why I am still here, but I'm not alone, and this is critical in my continued commitment. Always, through all of our very human failings, we find a core of committed members, old and new, who are willing to work to establish the covenantal community we all aspire to. It is this dream of the covenantal community that keeps me here, giving of my time and talent and treasure, and why I am willing to encourage you to do the same. Through all the ups and downs of these many years, I have found happiness and personal reward in this community. I am very much enriched when I stand with, work alongside of, and share deep concerns and aspirations with all of you. At this stage in my life, I want and need a supportive community, a family, if you will. A family to share with, to nurture and be nurtured by, to be happy for its successes and dreams, and when necessary, help to work out its conflicts. I remain committed to being part of this family as we grow in service to our mission, creating something of value to our larger community through our mutual effort. Thank you for the opportunity to share my feelings about this today, and I know our next speaker, Judy Lucarelli.
From the first service that we attended at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Springs in early 2018, the resilience of this church community was a major attraction for John and me. Services were being held at the Walton Center because the church had been closed for years to mitigate sinkholes and termites. For people with our roots in New England, both of these factors were new to us and seemed overwhelming. You can count on one hand the number of termites in Maine. They all died the first winter. And I'm sure there are sinkholes. They are everywhere, but they didn't get the publicity of Florida sinkholes. We walked through the door of the Walton Center, and there was the friendly, smiling face of Barbara Kostreva. Now I can't see you. Oh, Barbara Kostreva, yes, greeting us, and Barbara Rosen at the coffee pot. The weekly artwork from Karen and Bill provided the backdrop to the minister and the choir. Every week we had a report on the construction project. I felt like I was back as a school superintendent again. As reopening came nearer, we each had the opportunity to bring buckets and cleaning supplies to clean the buildings inside and to join in landscaping outside. There was a job for the talents of every member. Since almost everyone was retired, we had the time to do this. I have to say, I think Barbara Mellon was the only person in the church that wasn't a member at that time. I mean, that wasn't retired at that time, and the only one that had a young child. Things definitely have improved. But since most of us were retired, it meant that we were getting on in years, and so it took more time to do even the simplest of tasks. It was the optimism and enthusiasm with which we left the Walton Center behind and started having services in our church in May 2019. By late fall, the pews were full. By this time, 3 years ago, the pews were full. I'm talking about half full here, they were full. And there was talk of whether we would need to have 2 services each week. Barbara Kostreva was still at the door, now joined by others as everyone wanted to contribute. Barbara Rosen was at the coffee pot with now Jean and Charlie every single week. And the food in the social hall every week was varied and plentiful. Every week we got to talk to someone new at the coffee hour, all interesting and caring people. The resilience of this group was truly amazing. And then the real test began. COVID. We made the decision to close the church in response to COVID in early March 2020 and learned what resilience really meant. Keep in mind that John and I are of the generation that grew up with rotary dial telephones and dials on the television to change the channel. When we were first married in the early 70s, in 1970, the first duplicate hand tool in our household was an extra set of pliers because the dial fell off the TV. And we needed pliers to change the channel. I can see that resonates with a number of you. I thought, well, geez, we have this thing here. I could bring in some pictures. There's a picture of John holding the pliers in the kitchen with this funny-looking old TV, very heavy TV. And now, all of a sudden, we had to learn to use Zoom. We joined this church because of the connections with interesting people, a vibrant congregation with sign-up sheets on the table every week for some new adventure. And now we had to learn to mute and unmute so we wouldn't be able to talk at the same time. The sound in the social hall had been of many conversations and laughter, and now we were reduced to one person speaking at a time, and no one finding much to laugh about. We couldn't touch each other. We couldn't share a piece of lemon cake or the monthly birthday cakes from the caring committee. At the time, the church owned a laptop and a few microphones, the extent of our technology, in March of 2020. In the beginning, we recorded each piece of each service over Zoom from each person's home on, I think it was Wednesday, and then Tommy Frayne spent hours editing to make a YouTube recording to post by Saturday. So you could watch church on Saturday, or you could watch it on Sunday, or any time after that. Except that there was like not many people at all. 18 people were looking at the service when it first started. It was like, I have to say, well, that sounds like a big technological leap. It was like advancing from a rotary dial phone to a cordless handset, not even up to a cell phone yet. Committee meetings adapted to this new way of operating easier than the congregation as a whole because there were fewer people participating and we each knew we'd have a chance to say something. Progress was gradual. We contracted with a minister. I mean, for the first 7 months of 2020, we didn't have a minister. But once we had a minister, every single Sunday didn't have to be a guest speaker. We reopened, and then we closed again as a new COVID wave hit. And then we reopened again. If you were part of the church at that time and it seemed confusing, keep in mind that there were no rules to guide how to be church under these conditions. Every board meeting included discussion of how to engage with members and visitors, what restrictions were safe to lift, what do we still have to have, how to have classes for children, where we had children now, when they were not even vaccinated yet. We went from recording to live streaming, and now to this big screen TV in the church. I must admit, when Kathy first brought this concept to the board, I was one of the majority who said, no way. How can we have a TV in church, especially in a church with these wonderful paintings and this wonderful ambiance of the setting? A giant TV. Come on, this is not a sports bar. I was still clutching onto the pliers to change the channel. But I have adjusted, as everyone has made some adjustment from what we knew as church before. I was the treasurer during this period, and every pledge payment that came in brought a sigh of relief from me. And by the end of the year, all pledges were met. Even people who didn't get much out of watching a YouTube church service and weren't on a committee, still, how were they staying connected? But they still were meeting their commitments so we could continue to exist, because almost all of our bills continued even when we couldn't have service here. As this time of isolation and uncertainty continued, longtime members moved to be closer to family. Some of our elderly people passed away. We lost members. But somehow, new members joined the church. Joined what? No choir, no Barbara Kostreva smiling at the door, no Barbara, Rosen, Jean, and Charlie at the coffee pot. What were they joining? In fact, for everyone who left, someone new joined. Our membership has stayed almost constant throughout this period. And this included younger people with children who had never even seen a rotary dial telephone. I have to say, don't you get a kick out of it when someone has their ringtone, a rotary dial tone sound, and they've never even seen a rotary dial phone? Every time I hear that phone ringing, I think it's somebody, the transportation guy is calling me from the bus garage telling me we have to cancel school for snow. And so if your phone is that way and you see me jump when you do that, that's what I'm thinking. It's like some of those conditioned responses you don't lose. In my second stewardship campaign in November 2021, we also brought in the pledges that were needed. By this time, we were open, so at least we had the opportunity to make the case for why our church community needed each of us contributing to be sustainable. The combined live Zoom and in-person presence is still far less than it was 2 years ago when we first left the Walton Center. But the membership numbers are the same. This resilient community of new members and new technology coming together in new ways that still sometimes mystify me. You'll find me volunteering for just about anything, but not that over there. I was so relieved when somebody started volunteering to be part of the group over there. In case you can't tell on the Zoom people what I'm pointing to the tech team. But now we're almost to 2023, but we're not yet fully past COVID. Very few people in the grocery store are still masking like John and I are. This period of isolation seems almost over. Well, why did John and I stay connected with UUCTS? Because as we isolated, this church was our only regular contact with other people. In this era of political strife in our country, our church is a safe community. The church still isn't as full as it used to be, but it is our lifeline to being with others. I commented to someone recently that these days, some people getting a little testy about things, and I don't mean to put that down. We love passionate beliefs in this church. But it's like people here have cabin fever. If you've never lived through a winter in the north, let me explain about cabin fever. Cooped up inside all winter when it's dark and cold. And when you leave for work in the morning, it's dark, and when you get home at night, it's dark. The house has to be closed up because of the cold. People lose some of the social graces and tolerance for each other. In our church, we say we're moving away from covenant. Here in Tarpon Springs, we've not been cooped up in the cold and dark, but we have been cooped up in the heat and COVID isolation in a time of political hostility. So our reopening and reconnecting in person is more important than ever. Each of us needs to reach out to others to be sure we keep our unique community thriving. I'm a fourth or fifth generation you on the Burr side, or you on the Smith side. Now you. Over my life, I have attended many UU churches. As we moved with my dad getting his job established, and then once I became an adult, moving with my career. Now in my 70s, the first church in my life that I have ever joined is UUCTS, this church. Because this is the church that speaks to my spiritual needs. I didn't think I'd get emotional over this, but obviously I'm very passionate about it. To my needs for music and the visual arts and for social justice, and my needs to connect with like-minded but unique people. Thank you for being here for me and for each other, whatever our future brings. Thank you.
Our story today, Stone Soup, told us about a town and its people who were isolating themselves after many difficulties, and we've heard about these in our past here. The three monks offered their solution to help them trust again. The fear and resistance everyone felt could be helped by their connections to each other. It was basically, what will each of you bring to the table? May we think about what each of us can bring to the table of our Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Springs. May we each bring our time, our talents, and our treasures to keep our church strong and thriving during good times and difficult times.
When we meet in fellowship, oh, when we meet in fellowship, oh, aren't you glad to be in that number? When we meet in fellowship, each one of us makes up the church. Each one of us makes up the church. Yes, and for all and all together, each one of us makes up the church. Today's the day we celebrate. Today's the day we celebrate the future of our congregation. Today's the day we celebrate. Oh, when we meet in fellowship. Oh, when we meet in fellowship. Oh, aren't you glad to be in that number? When we meet in fellowship.
We hope you found meaning in today's service. We close with these words from Erica Hewitt. Sing to the power of the faith within. Sing to the power of our deep love, our strong hope and bright joy. But flex the power of these gifts too. Put your faith and hope to use. Share your joy and love more freely than you thought possible. For together, we use these tools to carve out lives of wonder, purpose, and service. And Jean will bring